Al Carlson. Al, quite a session. Thanks for taking some time. I want to start with here. Back in December, the governor releases his executive budget, $4 billion. Even you were like, boy, that's a lot of money to be spent. You guys ended up spending $6 billion. Help us understand what happened. Republican supermajority, you're a conservative. It doesn't seem to add up.
Well, what he did is he had about $1.6 billion, Chris, that he moved back in transportation funding and in water funding. He moved it into this biennium instead of the next biennium. We just moved it back so we could properly account for it when you do it in the biennium. So in the end, there was not a whole lot of difference between the two budgets, but it was easier. He thought it was better to leave it in the other biennium. We thought, for ongoing spending, we should move it all forward so we can keep track of it one time and ongoing, and really very little difference in the end.
So let me ask you this. Since 2003, we've spent now $1 billion more on K through 12 spending, and yet enrollment is down 2%. Where has that $1 billion gone?
The $1 billion is probably, of all the money we spend, education has always been a good investment for the state of North Dakota. I think that we just have to, I have no problem with spending the money on it, but I do think we need to ask for more accountability. What are we getting? Are we getting better performance out of our students and our teachers? Are we getting higher ACT test scores? Are we having less kids leaving high school and going to college that don't need remedial education? I mean, there's some things that we need to expect more when you give more.
So did you put in those performance metrics in this bill?
Well, there are some in there, but it's still not enough, and it's a work in progress. I tell you what, those guys that did the education bill worked really hard on it to try and get it as best shape they could. I think that in the end, it's a good product. Like always, every session you try and make it a little better.
So many people are saying that you killed the education bill on the last day. I didn't see it that way, but what do you say and what happened?
The base education bill was 1013. That was never in doubt. There's $1,093 million in that budget, an increase of about 12 or 14% over the last biennium. But what we did do is we dealt with in 1319 was the additional money that would have been increased educational funding by the state, which would be reflected back to property tax relief. So that bill was never in danger. We had another bill. We had the House and the Senate differed on how you were going to get that down. And you have to understand that the mill levy reduction that the property tax owner sees we were at 110 mills. We were buying down the cost of education to 110 mills. The Senate version was at 50 mills. The House version was at 70 mills to buy down. Lots of new money. We settled at 60. And then we added $200 million besides in a separate line item that are direct payment for the legislative initiative back to property tax owners. So in the end, the ingredients were all there. There was a firestorm and a panic with the media. Had anybody bothered to ask me, we could explain to them what was happening.
Many people are upset because they don't feel like you truly reformed the property tax aspect of things. The state now has taken over 80% of K through 12 education. Measure 2 got defeated because of people saying, hey, you got to keep it local. How is the state taking over 80% of K through 12, keeping it local?
Well, I tell you what, we've always been a participant. We searched for years, Chris, to get to the magic 70% number, and now we're at 83. And you know what? Maybe someday we should be at 100. But of a core education, maybe that should be the state's goal. But on the other hand, we need to expect some results because of it. It's a progress. We're making headway. We're now at 83%. But my big kick in the whole thing is that if you send $1 home on property tax relief, I expect the taxpayers to get it. So the bill was a merger of both. I mean, the governor sold it as a merge, but it was either going to be educational funding or property tax relief. And without the reforms, some of that's going to slip away. But we made some progress on reforms, not the ones that all of us wanted. But what we do need, Chris, is we need the local voters that are getting that property tax statement to get involved in the local budgets of their city, their county, their school, their township, their park board, and say enough is enough, slow the spending down, and tell it to me in percentages and dollars. And I think with that, if the citizens get involved, there will be some reform and there will be some slowdown in the property tax growth in terms of the taxpayer.
You just mentioned the state potentially taking over 100% of the K through 12 education. Isn't a basic Republican principle, conservative principle, the government closest to the people is the best government?
Well, it's always been a debate in government, Chris. We have a constitutional responsibility to fund an equal education for each and every North Dakota citizen or kid. So where does the Constitution start and stop? Does it say the state doesn't put any money in, it's all local? Or does the state say we send back money to the locals to offset our constitutional responsibility that the forefathers, when they established this state, said nothing more important than education. So you can say that it's not our responsibility and we're taking away local control, but we have no choice. The Constitution says you will fund it, and we've been moving that bar up, and I think I'm more of an accountability guy. Let's make sure that when you spend more, that you expect higher results from both your teachers and your students.
Let me ask you this. There's people that are on this show a lot, people in the area that are starting to question, hey, was Al really leading this session? Representative Betty Grandy ended up being the face of this session. What do you say to that?
You know, I would disagree with that completely. You know, the social issues are always controversial issues, whether it be the DUI bills or whether it be the animal cruelty bills or the pro-life bills. And if they were not by any means dominating in the session, they got the same amount of time as every other bill. It made a lot more news in the media, but the session was dominated by infrastructure, by educational funding, by property tax relief, by turning money back to the citizens, by fixing highways and roads. There was lots of, record amounts of money into human services. That did not dominate it. And I think that when you look at the final product, the governor said it best today. It was a great session for the citizens of North Dakota, and I believe that. You're never going to satisfy everybody. There's people who can always criticize you. It's too much or not enough. But you know what? We protected, and the House's philosophy has always been to safeguard the interests and the liberties and the checkbooks of the citizens of North Dakota, and we will never waver from that.
You took a lot of heat at crossover about the amendments about the diversion. Could you walk through your district right now, knock on doors, and look people in the eye and let them know you did the best thing for them when it comes to flood protection in your district? Absolutely.
When you look at the finished product, I chaired the conference committee. The finished product is $450 million. All we're asking for is the same thing we asked for when we started, is that there's federal participation and authorization of the project. We protected those people who live south of Fargo to give them a little more time to work on mitigation. We said here's $70 million on the table to build higher dikes in the city of Fargo so there'll be less sandbags. We said you can deal with ring dikes out in the Oxbow-Baki area. The finished product was a good product on that, and it's a process. You know, people jump to conclusions like the sky is falling, but it's a process. The sky didn't fall. The sun came up the next morning, and you know what? It was a great finished product for Fargo on its water projects. We put $30 million into a water treatment plant of state money, which we've never done, to upgrade Fargo's water plant. Nobody's talked about that. And we started putting money aside for the most important, I believe, project, and that's a water supply to the valley. We've ignored that. The city was given a choice, pick diversion or pick water to supply to the east. We were one storm away from a major flood, and we're one summer away from a major drought with no drinking water. And I maintain that you cannot exist in this community without that water supply.
In your opinion, the greatest accomplishment achieved this session was?
I would say, yeah, there's so many it's hard to pick, but I would say the property tax relief and the income and corporate income tax reductions were really big for the citizens of North Dakota. I think the educational funding levels in both K-12 and higher ed were monumental, and an investment of $3 billion in our infrastructure, which drive the economy, were excellent.
Representative Al Carlson, House Majority Leader, thanks for your time. Stay with us. Much more coming up right here on 630 Point of View.